Hey, this is Lon with Single Track Skills. I'm at a feature that we affectionately named Squamish-ish. The reason why we named it Squamish-ish is because at the time we built it, none of us had been to Squamish, but we imagined that this is what Squamish would be like. One of the guys who works for Transition came here and visited, and he rode this feature, and he said, hey, guys, it's neat enough to get its own name, which was a huge compliment, I think, because there's so much good riding in the Pacific Northwest, in Bellingham and further on up north into Squamish and Whistler. Anywhere east of Colorado, this is my favorite. It's just because it's so rare. It's a rock slab that you just don't see very many of these around this part of the country. And I'm going to give some quick tips on how to ride it. I'm going to flip the camera around now so that you can see the feature, which is a lot better to look at than my face. This is the feature from the bottom. So when I started this video, it was behind me and you can only see a little bit of it. Is over here on this side right here. It's probably the line that most people want to do, and very few people have done it. So you can see the cones where I'm showing is the best exit off of it. But we're going to go up and look at it from the top because it'll make a little bit more sense from the top. All right, we're checking it out from the top. Here's the run in. We run around through here. It's always kind of awkward because you're afraid you're going to hit your pedal on something like this and just it messes up your confidence, or hit your handlebar on one of these two trees. That's never happened to me, but it always makes me anxious. As you can see, when you come into this thing, it's blind. So that's just probably one of the things that makes it the hardest. And I always aim for that little bitty notch right in front of my cone there. Now, the part about this that is tricky is the bottom of it, way down there where you see that those last two, I guess, are they yellow or green cones? The last four cones that you can see down there. The run out is always changing on this. And it's not because of mountain bikes are riding it, because I think fewer than 20 people have ever ridden this line right here. It's just the weather. I mean, the rain, the sun, the elements change the bottom. The exit line that you see me having marked with the cones, that is the line we've used probably in the last 2 or 3 years. The original line that we used to use to exit was over here to the left where I'm pointing, right through there. So that's the way we first started doing it. But what has happened is the topsoil is gone there, so it's gotten a lot more rowdy in there, and there are a lot more rocks, so that makes it more tricky. This is, I'm asked a lot of times, is this more difficult than the feature called Science at Ride Birmingham, which is a very popular feature right close to the parking lot? I would definitely recommend you checking it out if you've never been to Ride Birmingham. It's so much fun. I think between Ride Birmingham and Oak Mountain State Park, we got so many good things just within a short 40-minute drive of each other, if that. But anyway, I think that this feature is actually more difficult than Science. Science is more intimidating, but with Science, you pretty much just need to know what speed to roll into it with, and then you don't even touch your brakes at all. This one requires not only the correct speed to run into it with, but it requires a tremendous amount of brake control. The brake control that is demanded for this feature, I actually teach in Ground Control 1, my first class. And so many people want to skip that because they think they're more advanced. But the description of that class is strong beginners all the way to expert. And the reason why I say this is a fundamental, this is a feature that requires the fundamental skill of braking, but it requires it at a very high level to where if you make any mistakes whatsoever, it's not going to be good. So there's nothing advanced about the skills that are required for running this feature and also for running science. What makes it extremely difficult is those basics, such as braking, body position, where we're looking, terrain awareness. All of those things have to be executed absolutely perfectly. Otherwise, things are going to go really, really wrong. And that's the reason why I would say this is a very advanced double black feature, but the only skills that it requires are basic skills like braking and body position and terrain awareness, all the things I teach in Ground Control 1. There are no advanced skills that are required of this, like jumping or drops or nose picks or manuals or any of that. But the point is, if you know those basics, then you take those basics with you for any feature, whether it's a beginner, intermediate, expert, on up. All right. So yeah, let me see what else I can tell you about this. I would not do it in the wet. I've never done this feature in the wet. I've probably done this feature, this line on the feature probably 20 times in my life. And I wouldn't do it in the wet because it can get pretty slick. In the dry, it is not nearly as scary once you do it as you think it's going to be. And the reason for it is this section right here, where I couldn't place the cones because it's too steep. You can really get on your brakes hard there. And that's what I would recommend. I would recommend getting on that front brake super, super hard. Drop your heels. I'm going to put a picture of an example of good body position from the side on this video so you can see at the end. Heels dropped, elbows are bent, but they're not bent too much. You want to bend them just enough to where when the front wheel, or if the front wheel gives away, you can recover, but you don't want to bend them too much that you can't brace yourself against the back of the handlebars. You don't want to be pushing down on the top of the handlebars, but bracing yourself with your hands against the back. So you're using your legs with your knees bent really low. You're dropping your heels to help you brace with your legs. A good portion of your bracing is with your legs, but there is some bracing that goes on with your arms. So the old saying, heavy feet, light hands, while that is true, your hands are heavy on this feature from the standpoint that you're using them to brace, but you're bracing from the back, not from the top. So a beginner rider, when we tell a beginner rider heavy feet, light hands, what we're trying to do is get him or her not to push down on the top of the grips and put their hands heavy that direction. But on this feature, your hands are going to be heavy because they're pushing from the back, and you're using your hands to brace yourself. But I would say still 90% of what you're wanting to brace with is your legs as much as possible. You have to pick a point to look at when you come into this because it's blind. Science at Ride Birmingham is not blind. That's what makes it a little bit easier because you can see the whole thing. This, I can't see my line, so I have to pick out something, like I said, that little rock crevice there, and trust that if my front tire runs over that, I'm going to be right on my line. All right, that makes it harder. The other thing that makes it harder is, see, there's a hump here, and the hump makes it more difficult because you have to have enough speed to get over the hump, but you don't want any more speed than what you have to get over the hump without a weeble wobble, because the hotter you come into this, the hotter you're going to exit it. And even whenever you try to ride it as slow as possible, for me, at least for my reaction time, I'm exiting it as fast as I want to. So I wouldn't want to come into this any faster than I need to. So it's tricky. You don't want to come in too fast, but you don't want to come into too slow. How do we know we're too slow? Well, the same as the video I did on science and the other roll downs. You know you're going too slow if you weeble wobble right as you're coming in. The problem with weeble wobbling here is if I start to weeble wobble and fall to one side or the other, I could tap my crank arm on the rock and it can throw me off balance, or my front wheel could turn to one side or the other, and that would send me over the handlebars or off in a direction that I don't want to go. And neither one of them would be good. It would be like falling out of a 2 or 3 story building. I saw one guy almost head off that direction because he weeble wobbled, but he was able to recover and he came out of it, but it scared me to death. I have never crashed on this feature. I'm debating whether or not to retire from it. I'm 55 now, and I think that sometimes it's best just to go out on a win instead of wait until there's an accident and then go out. But I will tell you, the only time I almost crashed was I had a faulty shock. And the rebound was bad on the shock. And when I came into this pylon right here, this cone right here, it would be the second from the top. You see that hole there? We actually want to enter to the left of that green cone, so where that dirt is, not to the right where the foliage is. We want to enter to the left of that, and then we want to go straight on to where that yellow cone is, and basically follow all the rest of the cones straight on out. So you can see a little better if I can zoom out. All right. But back to me almost crashing. So my front tire went through it, no problem at all. But when my rear tire hit that impression or that compression there, the shock was bad and it bucked me. So the rebound threw that rear wheel up and it almost threw me over the handlebars into the rocks. And that was super, super scary. I got rid of that shock and I replaced it with a Cane Creek coil and it cleaned it up. There was no problem at all. So that's an example of how your equipment can cause you to crash. But that's the only close call I've ever had on this line. Let's talk a little bit more about how to do the line. So I talked about how you need to have just the right amount of speed to crest over the top. Once you're into this little groove right here, lots of front brake, I said. You can use a lot of rear brake too. That's no problem. But just realize that your rear brake is hardly doing anything because there's hardly any weight on that rear tire. And many times when I've ridden this and I can feel the rear tire off the ground a good portion of the way. So it's almost like a controlled stoppie. It's not that I'm doing a stoppie, because with a stoppie, I'd want to be taller. I'm crouched. I'm not looking for a stoppie, but I am on that front brake so harsh that rear tire is just kind of touching down every once in a while. It's in the air a good portion of the time down. So that gives you an idea of how much front brake I'm using. And the biggest mistake I see people make is they don't use enough front brake right up here in this pocket. So because of that, they're going way too fast down at the bottom and they end up out of control. So if there's one word of advice I would give for an expert rider who's looking at this and wanting to check it off, give a lot more front brake in this top section than what you would ever imagine, because the grip is really good. Obviously, if you're grabbing that front brake and that front tire starts to shift to one side or the other sideways, you have to let off the front brake. And that's what makes this more tricky than science, is it's constant brake control. And it's happening so fast because you're down this before you even know it. So you're hard on the front brake. If it starts shifting too much or that rear tire starts getting too high, you got to ease the squeeze on that front brake, but then get back on it, then ease it, then back on it, then ease it. And then next thing you know, your front wheel is in that hole right there. You have to let off the front brake for the hole. And then once you're through the hole, get back on the front brake before that next cone right there. All right. And then you're going to let off it for the next hole, and then you're going to be back on it again. So it's on off almost as fast as your eyes are focusing from distance to close to distance to close. You don't even think about it. All right. So yeah, those are the tips I would give on this. Where is this located? A lot of people ask me, where is it? Well, it's at Oak Mountain State Park. If you go on Trail Forks, you can, or MTB Project, you can find Boulder Ridge. The feature, if you can look to your right as you're coming to the end of Boulder Ridge, you'll see it. It's almost where Boulder Ridge comes back into the road. And you will be riding Boulder Ridge the most popular direction, which would be, we would call it clockwise, all right, from the north trailhead towards the south. Yeah, so you can't miss it. It's huge. As you can tell from the video, I'm on a rather large bike when I'm demoing it. It's a big bike, a lot of travel. The smallest travel bike I've ever ridden that line on was a 27.5 wheel size, 130 in the front and 130 in the rear. And it felt about the same, but that was 5 years ago, so my reaction time was better. It definitely favors a larger travel bike for sure. Yeah, let me know if you have any questions in the comments. I'll do my best to answer them. I'm really trying to kind of pass on this knowledge to the younger generation because I'm pretty much retired from all of these lines, and I want to pass on what I've learned the hard way to them so that they can take it to the next level. We know they will.